I'm on. I'm going to give it a second. Yeah, I know it's going to take you a minute. Pacific Standard. Nobody's watching yet, so I'm just going to stare at myself for a minute. Nope, somebody's watching. Is it you?
I don't know.
Probably.
I can't see where you are.
Yeah, refresh it a few times. A few hundred times. Good morning. If you're on, say hi. I get to see comments for a few minutes. You got it?
I got it.
Awesome. Who's watching? Who's hanging out today?
We got Marlene.
Hello, Marlene.
We got Connie Isaac.
Hi, Connie.
And Shelley Schaefer?
Schaefer? I don't know. Straight.
Shelley Straight.
Shelley
That's
Straight.
easier.
Shelley Straight. I'm sorry. I don't know how to say your maiden name or your middle name.
Diana McCrae from California.
Diana's always on. And Diane, good morning.
Donna Sullivan.
Awesome. People are coming.
Sally.
Hi, Dorothy.
Hi, Dorothy. She said good morning to both of us.
Good morning. For some reason now I'm not seeing comments and only you are. That's very bizarre. I don't know, but there is enough of you here, so just in case, I'm going to cover up the comments in a second here. Good morning. So I hope you guys can hear me a little bit better. If you were having any issues in the past, I have a microphone now, so I think we should be nice and clear. The downfall for Barb is that if she asks me questions, you guys can hear her too, and she doesn't want you to hear her, but that's too bad.
Yes, I do.
No, yes, she does. Do you want to come say hi quick? Would you guys like to meet Barb? If you don't know her, this is Barb who helps me out on Fridays. So say hi. Barb has a long arm quilting business. Yes, I mentioned it last week, and yes, I forgot to tag her in the post, but I'm going to do that for you just in case you are ever looking for a long armor. You can follow her page too, so I will list her. Since we're just getting started, I'm just going to kind of go through my list here. So I mentioned Barb, and I'm going to tag all this stuff. I promise. I know I forgot last week. If any of you are long armors yourself or are into learning how to long arm, my friend Carly Porter, you might know her name from graffiti quilting. It's a technique that she has designed. She has a few books on it. She actually has a course coming up, and I'm probably going to say this wrong. I'll fix it when I post it later. I believe it's either July or August or somewhere in this summer. I have an affiliate code, so if you want to sign up for her online class and save $50, I have a code for that. It's SMC GQ, like so many creations, graffiti quilting 50, and you'll save $50. I will make sure to post that, and I will tag her as well. Let's see what else. Like the page, follow the page, and share if I haven't already asked you that. And thank you to all 47 of my YouTube subscribers. I'm working on another video soon. Let's see. My friend Linda over at Colorworks, I don't know if you guys are familiar with her. She's over on the West Coast. Her and her husband Carl have the company Colorworks. They do a lot of machine applique and some really fun, very bright patterns. If you're looking for something to watch later, you can check her out on Facebook at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So that's 1 o'clock our time, Eastern Standard. So she will be on in a few hours. So if you guys are interested, Colorworks, again, I will tag her, is spelled Colourwerx. Her husband is British. That's why it's that version of color with the U in it. But I will tag her. Today's topic, and this is why I wanted to mention this, is machine applique tips. I definitely need some of those because I don't do hand applique, but I like to do machine applique every once in a while. So I'm going to watch her video and get some tips on that. And last but not least, before we get into all the pretty stuff, because I've been very busy this week, is Quilt Week, which is AQS, the American Quilter Society. You can sign up to be part of AQS to get the membership if you want. It's a paid membership, but also right now they're signing up with for free with your email address, and you can get some different deals from people that vend there. and there's different ads going up. I have an ad that's on there this week. And so if you go to quiltweek.com, there's a little box that will pop up and you can sign up and get their newsletter. They've been doing interviews. They've had some really fun stuff. It's all for free. So if you're interested, I just like to share anything that I have that might be fun for you to watch. I don't know about you guys, but it's going to be like 90 here in New York. So I'm thinking inside with the air conditioning is where I'd like to spend my afternoon. So I think that was all of that stuff. Let's get to what I've been working on this week. I don't remember who asked me. It might have been Connie. I cannot remember. But somebody had asked me for another Abby kit. And unfortunately, I did not get a chance to get that done just because I've been super busy with some other stuff this week. But I'm going to get that on the page hopefully next week. I'm going to try my hardest. But if you go to the kits and inspiration page, there is a ton of new kits. You'll see behind me, I've got an Emily back here. There is a Lainey backpack, an Ellie handbag, a Lucy handbag. There's a bunch of new kits all listed on the website that you can find with and without patterns. I also added another Taurus tote bag, fun for summer. And this one's there, the Kaylee. So if you're looking to work with cork for the first time and you want a project that you get everything, you'll get your interfacing, you'll get your lining fabric, you'll get all of the stuff that you need and pattern if you need it. There's another Lucy, all in cork. So it's just a fun way if you're looking for another project. So all of those kits are listed. Plus, I have not made a new Diva sample in quite some time, and since we're talking about patterns today, I knew the Diva wallet would come up, and so I decided to make a bunch of kits. I made a lot of kits. I made a lot of new samples, if I can grab them all. So all of these, I posted a little teaser pic. All of these are kits on the website, and each one of them has Tula Pink homemade inside. So you get your fat quarters, you get one of the plastic zippers that looks like metal, you get your frame, you get an extra piece of cork for this little extra front accent. It's something that I didn't do originally in the Diva, but when I did the Prima Diva, it's one of my favorite parts of it is that little strip down the middle. So now you get a little bit of extra cork to play with. And can you see the stitching I did on that one? That is... It does not come with it, no. Barb just wanted to make sure you knew that. But the stitching was actually done with some of the stitches on my machine. So all those stitches that your machine comes with, that they always tell you, this machine has 300 extra stitches and you never use any of them, that's what you can do with them. And it's just something fun to play with. Here's another one. This is the salmon with the pastel green. I love that one. I'll show you the inside. I think this is my favorite. I don't know. I'll say that about all of them. Got the pink, nice bright pink with rainbow. These are all on the website with and without patterns. I know the pattern is one of my older ones. Most of you, a lot of you have made it. Some of you surprisingly still have not. So if you are looking to make one, you can get all your stuff and you get some nice Tula Pink with it. And it gives you the opportunity to play with cork if you haven't played with cork. You don't even have to use this piece if you want to just kind of play around with it. It's just like a little extra piece. You get your frame, you get to play with our zippers, so just kind of fun. That one, the purple. Now this one I'm not going to show you the inside of this one because this is what it actually looks like. This is what yours will look like. But this one, do you remember last week my show and tell? That's my wool applique. So I added that on my wallet. And don't forget your show and tell. If you have anything you want to show this week, you can tag it after we get done. Post it in the comments. If it's my pattern, you can post it right to the page. Otherwise, if it's just something fun you worked on this week, don't be afraid to add that in the comments. I'm falling off my chair right now because I'm way too low and I'm sitting on a quilt. Hang on. This is not working. I'm just going to have to sit down here because I'm going to fall on the floor, which will be really funny for all of you, but not for me when I break my tailbone. So I just kept sliding and sliding. And one more. Now, here's another thing to let you guys know. You remember the little ginger wallet? This nice, easy, simple little wallet I showed you a few weeks ago. This is made from one 9x12 piece of cork. But if you want to do a 2-color one, which I don't have one here to show you because, as usual, I'm not prepared, you can get any of these combinations on the website already cut out for you, so you get a little bit of both colors, so you can make a 2-color ginger wallet. You can get it again with or without the pattern, and that one has no zippers, no hardware, nothing. It's a nice, simple, easy pattern for you to put together. So I think that's everything. Now we're going to talk about patterns and how I got into writing patterns. So again, I covered up the comments, so I can't see anything. They weren't coming up for me anyway. I don't know why, but that's okay. If you have questions, and I hope that you do, feel free to add them in the comments. Barb's going to let me know when we have some questions. I'm going to talk for a few minutes, excuse me, and then I will answer some of your questions. So again, just like I said last week, this is not a tutorial. This is not how to run a business and start a business. This is not start to finish how I write a pattern. This is just kind of how it happened for me. Maybe a few tips if you are looking to get into it. Again, if you have a question that you're not comfortable putting in the comments, you can always send me an email and let me know, and I'm happy to answer that for you. But again, please note that this is not a pattern writing business 101 kind of a class. This is just giving you some information. So if you didn't get a chance to watch last week's video, it is linked. You can watch it later if you want. We'll make this real quick. Last week I talked about how I started my business, how I started So Many Creations. And the way that I started it was actually not to be a pattern business. That was something that was not on my mind at all. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. But my business was actually making custom bags. So like the bags that you see behind me, I didn't sell these as is, but I would take your order and I would make a bag per your requests. I got burned out really quickly. And even though I said I would never write patterns, never say never, because now I do. So I'm going to pick up where we left off and kind of pick up and tell you how that all started for me. So number one, I do firmly believe, and this is not a spiritual or religious belief, but this is just in my brain here, that we each have a path, whether we know it or not. And I think that pattern writing and making, and being able to make samples and doing what I do is what I was meant to do. I just didn't know it at the time. So when I was making all these bags and I was just getting burned out and I wasn't loving it, my husband had mentioned a couple times, why don't you write patterns? Maybe, quilters, maybe they'd want to make some of these bags. And I was like, no, absolutely not. I don't want to write patterns. I don't know how to write patterns. I have no interest in it. And these people are quilters. They don't want to make bags. Now, keep in mind, I started my business, my pattern writing part of the business in 2011. Bags were not that popular back then. Instagram wasn't a thing. There wasn't a lot of stuff on Etsy. It just wasn't a big thing because hardware was hard to find. Good zippers they were hard to find. It was just not everyone's cup of tea. The quilt shops avoided it because nobody wanted to teach the classes, and there weren't a lot of patterns out there. So when I first started doing this, it wasn't as popular as it is now. And just in getting burned out so much from making custom bags and spending every waking hour that I had of free time sewing for other people, I thought, you know what, maybe he's right. Maybe I should try making, some patterns. I know I said it on camera. Yes.
Just to let you know,
yes.
Linda Kirshner says your instructions are so clear, you were indeed meant to write patterns.
Well, thank you, Linda. That is the sweetest comment ever. I'm almost embarrassed to say that back. It's in the comments. Linda just left me she complimented me. Now my cheeks are red. And because of people like you, that is why I enjoy doing what I do. So basically what happened, and it's really funny, there's moments in your life that you remember very, very clearly. And I remember I had a sewing room upstairs in our house at the time. I don't anymore. I sew in the corner of our living room. Thanks, construction. But I was upstairs and I was standing at my ironing table, looking at my machine and thinking, I can't do this anymore. I've had enough. I don't want to make any more bags by somebody else's requirements. I want to do my own thing. Christmas had just passed or was just getting close. I was done for the year. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I don't want to do this anymore. But I like having a business. I want to keep going with So Many Creations. And I thought, you know what? I have an idea. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to write patterns for all the bags that I've been selling because I already have the measurements and the technique. I know what I want to do. I'll write them as patterns. I will do them as PDFs. I will never have to print anything, and I'll sell them on Etsy because everybody that sells stuff on Etsy, they're like millionaires, aren't they? This was my thinking. Yes, I was 31. I was kind of stupid. So I was like, I can do this. This will be great. And so I got this great idea. it was around December, January, I started writing some stuff. And of course, I don't have a sample in front of me to show you, but the leading lady, it's a wristlet. It's like an oversized wristlet. That was my first pattern. I have no idea why I picked that first, but I did. It was something small and simple. So I drafted up a pattern and excuse me, I don't know how to write a pattern. I don't know anything about patterns. I'm clueless going into this. So I thought, well, I'll do what I know. Microsoft Word. So I'm not techie. I don't know how to use Illustrator. I don't know how to use any of these fancy programs. I mean, guys, I just joined YouTube this year and I'm 40, but it's fine. So I started just writing them in Word. And what I found was my technique, even though at the moment I didn't really know that it was like kind of my style, was that I don't write a pattern the way that like a Simplicity or a McCall's does, where they just say cut, sew, end of story. I have a story to tell when I'm writing a pattern. And I feel like I want to answer all of your questions and I want you to feel like I'm with you. So I tell you, so next we're going to do this. And then we're going to do it this way. And here's why, because I know you have a question. This is why we're going to do it this way. And I tend to be very lengthy in talking, shocking to everybody watching and to Barb. But I just had this, I felt like the only way to explain how to make a bag was to thoroughly go through and have a conversation with you. I did not know that that was my style. It's just kind of how it started, and that's what I did. And so I have had people, look at the patterns and say, that looks kind of thick. What's in this, And it's because I'm mouthy. I write everything down and I want you to understand everything because I can't always be with you making patterns. I wish I could. Right now I can't be with anybody except Barb. So just us. But that was kind of how I got into my technique. Now, I mentioned this a couple of videos ago, and if you've known my patterns for a while, you also know this. In the very beginning, I didn't know how to like photograph the step outs, how to put pictures into things. I didn't know a lot. So I drew everything. And the program that I used was actually a CAD-based program that I had from my old work. I was an interior designer in the beginning of this and then up until a few years ago. Actually, I can't even say that. God, it's been like 10 years since I've done that. But anyway, so you work with what you know. And that's kind of, lesson number one to give any of you that want to write patterns. If you use Adobe Illustrator, then use that. If you use Microsoft Word, then use that. Pick the program that you're comfortable with and pick the way to get your point across that makes the most sense to you. You can keep it short and sweet. I have shortened some of them a little bit and started to talk less and instruct more in my wording. And you can also, you can tell your story of how you made that bag or that quilt or whatever you're writing a pattern for in your own words. Because if you imagine yourself in a classroom teaching somebody how to do it, then that's what's going to help you to write the pattern. Where when it comes to quilt patterns, and I know a lot of us are quilters, when it comes to quilt patterns, there's a lot that's left unsaid. There's a lot of things in a quilt pattern that is not told to you. It's rare that anyone ever tells you how to bind. It's rare that anyone tells you how to quilt the pattern. They assume that you're either just going to figure that out on your own, or you already know how to do it, or maybe you have a long armor like Barb. Whatever that the case is, they don't get into detail on that. We don't really talk a lot about how to sew with a 1/4 inch seam because as a quilter, you're supposed to already know that. So I find that quilting patterns, especially mine, are like 2 to 3 pages tops. And that's how a lot of patterns are. Maybe there's a template, maybe there's a special ruler, and that's about it. In bag making, I have to assume that you don't know how to do any of this. I can't just tell you to make a handle because there's so many ways of making it. I can't just tell you to put in a flip lock or a twist lock. I can't tell you to just put in a zipper because there's so many ways of doing that. And so in instructing and in trial and error and testing out different things and also selling bags first, I figured out the things that worked for me and the things that I thought would make your life easier. And I mentioned this, I think when we were talking about the trio pattern a while ago. It's not that that pattern was ever bad, but as an artist, you reformulate your techniques and you learn new things and you learn quicker shortcuts of doing things. So it's never a bad thing to update something and to, have to put it out there again and say that it's been reworked. It's been improved. It wasn't bad to begin with, but I wanted to make it better. So that is something that I have done with some of the patterns as well. I'm just trying to think here. I see Barb's not writing, so none of you have questions. So I just have to...
Everybody's raving about your instructions.
Thank you to anybody giving me wonderful, wonderful comments on that. And not to be a giant bummer, but I'm going to say it because I know that some of you on here want to get into pattern writing. And I'm going to say this. I said some things last week that you probably already knew, but sometimes I need to say it. So I'm holding your hand right now and looking you in the eye and telling you this. There's going to be people that are not sweet and friendly and wonderful like you guys. There's going to be people that write you hate emails and say horrible, nasty, rotten things to you because they don't know how to make their point. When they struggle with something, instead of just saying, help me, I'm having a problem, which some people do, there are some people in the world that will just tell you that you're awful, your pattern's awful, you suck. And I'm sorry to say it, but that's it. It's the world that we live in. So don't let that ruin you. Take it and try to make it as constructive in its criticism as you can. Just let it, roll off your back and try not to let it ruin you, because if I took all of the bad things and I let them outweigh the good things, I wouldn't have a pattern business. And for the most part, the wonderful people like you outweigh the bad any day. So just be prepared that you will always have some backlash and someone that doesn't agree with you, someone that doesn't think you're right, someone that tries to convince you that 8 times 6 is not 48, even though you know that it is. I could tell you a lot of stories and I won't, because I just won't be that person. But just trust me, there will always be somebody that tries to knock you down. Don't let them. That's all I can say. Last week we talked about it with the people that want to negotiate the prices on their bags. Stand firm. Take it for what it is and take it with a grain of salt and just keep going with what you're doing. So one of the other things that I definitely learned, and I feel like I'm proud of myself and I've improved in this, is photographs. And I'm not just talking about the photographs inside a pattern. I'm talking about the photographs on the outside of a pattern. And I wish that I had saved one of my old patterns, and unfortunately they're long gone now. But I had an old pattern. I don't even use it anymore because it wasn't a super popular pattern. Old. And on the front cover, it was a set of 3 bags, not the trio, it was a different bag. It had a cream color, a plum color, and a navy. When you photograph super dark colors like that, they don't photograph always as crisp and clear, and the bags almost mushed together and you couldn't see clearly the bags. I thought it was an all right photo. I sold the pattern. We sold some. When I went in and made new samples and I re-photographed the front and I changed it to like an aqua and a pink and like bright colors, that pattern sold 10 times more than it did before. Because sometimes it's a photo, and we're all guilty of it. We all know that. You walk into a quilt shop and you go, that quilt right there, I love it. You don't know why, but something about the blue or the pink or whatever it is appeals to you. You look at another quilt, and even though the pattern, it might be pretty, but I can't see past the colors in it, I can't make the pattern. People will feel that way when they buy a pattern, and I've done it. You've probably done it. Have you done it? You've done it. Barb's shaking her head. And it's hard because we are creative people and visual people, but sometimes we can't get out of our own mind and see that I don't like that bag because it's green and pink. Well, you don't have to make yours green and pink. You can make another one. That one's not Barb's favorite, and that's fine. I understand. But she made one of those in her colors. Remember the Lucy? Because she doesn't really love the olive green and the rose gold. I think it's grown on her a little bit. But that's okay. And you have to get past it, but you also have to understand that other people sometimes can't get past it. And I love that one.
That might disappear.
This one might not be here anymore because Barb's trying to steal it because she likes aqua, but that's okay. So just note that your pictures can make a world of difference. So that's something that I've definitely learned. Like I said, my patterns sometimes tend to be thick. The reason for that, there's a couple reasons. Number one, I do not print double-sided. So if you've never used one of my patterns, you might not know that. You might look at it and think, man, that is a thick pattern. The reason that I don't print double-sided, it would definitely save me money. My printer has asked me that a few times. 2 main reasons. I don't know about you, but if I'm reading a book, I want to just flip. I don't want to flip back and forth like this. It drives me crazy. So if I'm trying to make a pattern and then I'm trying to flip it all around, it drives me nuts. Number 2, if there's a template, kind of hard to cut out a template if there's words on the back side of a pattern. So I always print them single-sided, and some of the bags, depending on what it is, what techniques are used, if it has templates, some of the bags can be 18 pages long. And that's why. It's a choice that I made. You can make your own choice, but that's something that I felt very strongly about because I did read a lot of patterns. I've had patterns that you have to unfold and patterns that are backside, and it just, personal preference drives me crazy. So that's why I do it that way. That's why the patterns are thick. And they are, and I do, like I said last week, I think I do have them printed locally. I like to support small businesses whenever I can, and I have a local printer who's wonderful. The first time that I sent them a very large order, he called me and said, "Did you make a typo?" And I'll tell you what this means in a minute. He asked me if I meant 20 because I said 200, and I said, no, I actually meant 200. So let's talk about how that happens, because again, as I told you, I feel like this for me was kind of I was being pushed in this direction. And when you start writing patterns, there's different avenues that you can go down and different ways you can sell them and different ways you can market them and different things that may or may not happen in your pattern writing career. So one of the things for me was, I told you, I just thought I was going to sell them as PDFs on Etsy. I never imagined that I was going to be printing them because, again, I didn't know how, and I thought it was going to be really expensive. But this is what happened to me. And I hope that Pat is watching this or watches this at some point. Pat works at my local shop, Log Cabin. She also worked at another shop before that. That's how we met each other. And I went into the shop one day. We had become friends. We were just chit-chatting. And she said to me, because she knew me from going in and buying fabric for those bag parties that I was doing. And she said, I have a question for you. Can you teach some bag classes? Have you ever thought about teaching? And I said, sure, I've taught a few times. Why not? I said, what do you want me to teach? And she goes, bags, because we have nobody to teach them. None of us want to learn how to make bags. We need a teacher and we don't have one. And I said, sure, what do you want me to teach? And she said, anything you want, any bag pattern you want. Well, light bulb went off. And I thought, okay, I'm going to mention it and just see what she says. I don't know why, but I just got this idea in my head. And I said, well, I'm actually writing my own patterns. And the enthusiasm and excitement on her face, she was like, great, teach those. What I didn't tell her at the time, and she's heard this story before, so she knows, was that she kind of called my bluff. I only had one pattern partially drafted. I didn't actually have patterns. And I didn't know anything about them. So I was like, sure, I'll bring them in for you. So I went home and I wrote a bunch of patterns, and a few weeks later, yes, a few weeks, I was super ambitious then. I brought her a bunch of samples. I brought her the patterns, and I said to her, can you help me? Because I don't really know what I'm supposed to do from here. And she said, well, you're going to want to sell them wholesale because we're a business. We'll resell them. I said, what's wholesale? Yes, I had no idea what it was. She said, you're going to have them printed, nicely, maybe print the cover in color. And I said, okay. And what about these bags? Like, how do you get the plastic bags that you put the patterns in? I knew nothing. I went into this blind because it was not my original plan. So I got some sources from her. I got some info from her. And that was kind of how the business itself on the physical paper side and the wholesaling started. So for me, and this was just kind of my journey for this, I started at that local shop. I started teaching there. They bought my patterns. I made them samples. From there, other local quilt shops, because I think at the time there was 11 or 12 quilt shops within like a 50-mile radius of my house. We've since lost some, but we had a lot in this area. We live in upstate New York. There isn't a lot else to do in the wintertime. Everybody loves to quilt. We had tons of quilt shops. And so that kind of escalated into, oh, why don't you go to this shop? Or, oh, this shop wants to get a hold of you. Or, I heard you teach at this shop. Would you teach at my shop? Something that I would probably do differently now, I definitely oversaturated our area. I was teaching everywhere. There were very few shops that I was not teaching at. And the downfall of that, it's great because you're teaching, you're getting your name out there. So it did work for me. The negative of that is that Barb is a quilter. She has certain shops she goes to. So if she's been to one and I'm teaching, she's not going to go to the other and take a class. You're only going to get, certain numbers of students. I definitely tried to spread myself a little too thin. I was still working full time and I was trying to teach and market my patterns, but I was the only one doing it. So that ended up pushing me out into other states, and it was kind of word of mouth that got me into other quilt shops and guilds and things like that. It kind of slowly expanded. I'll be honest with you, I didn't do a lot of marketing. I was working full time. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know, if I knew what I know now, I would have approached it differently, but it was just a lot of, like somebody would take my class and they would be at another quilt shop and they would mention it, or they would see my pattern and they would say, she lives kind of local. Why don't you have her teach? So for me, it kind of circled out from there. It was kind of like what I said to you last week when we were talking about making bags. You start with your core group of friends and family, and it kind of grows out and out from there. Kind of the same thing with the patterns. And so that was how I got into the shops. Now, do you have a question?
I have one question. Somebody wants to, Lori Herring.
Yeah.
Wants to know, do you have a So Many Creations group?
Oh, so Lori Heron, well, side note for a second here. Lori Heron wants to know if I have a So Many Creations Facebook group. No, I do not. It's something that I just keep forgetting to start. I know that you guys like to be part of groups. If you're all interested in that, I've always just sent people to my page, which is what you're on right now. If you're interested in having a group, it is something that I would definitely consider putting together. So if you're interested, leave it in the comments and let me know that. So I see Barb writing something else down, but I want to kind of finish that thought of getting my patterns out there. So again, I never anticipated this. I never planned on this. So going to the different shops and then starting to teach at different shops, it was fun and it was great. And it was like a nice little side income. I worked full time and then I dropped down to 4 days a week. And then I was teaching Friday, Saturday, Sunday every week. It was overwhelming. And I thought, how do you get your patterns out there to places that you can't go? Because, excuse me, I'm in New York. Maybe somebody in Colorado doesn't want to pay to fly me out and teach me. How do I get my patterns out there? And I met some other pattern designers, and they told me about Quilt Market and about the distributors. I may have briefly mentioned this before. I think like when we were talking about Cork a few weeks ago, there are these distributors that work with the quilt shops, and these companies have reps that go to every quilt shop. So they sell a lot of things. They sell patterns, they sell fabric, they have hardware, they have lots of different stuff. They have thread, everything. So if you can get in with one of them, what happens is now your patterns are on their pattern page. You become one of their designers whose patterns they sell. When something's new, they kind of promote it a little bit for you. They show people. And that's how quilt shops outside of our immediate area, because I think the furthest I drove to teach was maybe 2 hours. Outside of that area, these quilt shops that I didn't know started picking stuff up. Because of this, when someone emails me and says, hey, I live in Wisconsin, do you have any shops that sell your patterns? I have no idea, because I don't have a way of keeping track of it. Somebody else is doing it for me. So I didn't know that was a thing. And that was how that happened. And the way that I got picked up by these distributors was by going to Quilt Market. And if you're not familiar with Quilt Market, which you may or may not be, or you may have heard of it and not know what it is, Quilt Market is a wholesale only show. You can't go to it if you're just a consumer. It's not an open quilt show like going to Paducah or Houston. It's for the industry. It's for people like myself that sell patterns. It's for people like Barb, that long arm. It's for people like Log Cabin that have a shop. It's only our industry, our wholesale side of it. So in going to this and paying for a booth space and showing, a display like this, that was how I picked up more shops, and that was how I picked up distributors. So this was a whole new animal and a whole new game that I didn't know about. And the reason I like to share it is because no one told me this. I didn't know in the beginning. There was no how-to manual on starting a business, unfortunately. Otherwise, I'd love to sell it to you. But that was kind of how that happened and how I ended up getting my name out there more. You have more questions, I think?
I have one.
We're going to pause for a question.
Sandy Lamika.
Okay.
She wants to know, how many years have you been teaching?
Sandy would like to know how many years I've been teaching. I had this calculated at one point and I can't remember. I'm going to say, because I started with a few classes at my local guild that I was a part of, just little, it was even before I wrote patterns. I think I just drafted something up for them to make. I want to say I started teaching 15 or 16 years ago. It sounds really weird to say that. It's been that long, because I'm pretty sure I was not married when I started teaching, and then started selling bags and teaching a little tiny bit, and then really fully focusing on pattern writing and selling bags in 2011. So next year will be my 10th anniversary for pattern writing. So I'm overall about 15 years teaching, pattern writing almost 10, 9.5 at this point, because I actually started right in the beginning of the year. So yes, we have another question.
We do. Linda Kirshner wants to know how you got to be the featured designer for Better Homes and Gardens.
That's actually really fun. So Linda wants to know how I became the featured designer for Better Homes and Gardens. We've been talking about those little train cases. A couple months ago, or actually back in January, was the little crossbody. There's another one coming up, but I can't tell you about it yet. A few more weeks and I can show you the other one. So how that happened was, again, Quilt Market. So there's always good and bad to everything. Quilt market, it is, I guess the negative part, you're putting money out there and you're hoping for a result, and there's no guarantees. There's no guarantees with anything, but it's a lot of money, it's travel, it's expenses, it's all that. And you get a booth and you network. And what had happened was, in being at market with my patterns, that was how I ended up becoming a fabric designer. That's a whole topic for another day. And that was because I met people through Quilt market. And I met this lovely girl, Joanna. I say girl, she's probably closer to my age, and she's a lady. Joanna. She works for, don't laugh, I know I'm not a lady. So she works for Better Homes and Gardens for the Quilt, it's not Quilt Sampler, it's the Quilts and More. That's the magazine I'm in. So, which is their in-between issue, which does all the small projects. And she had met me a few years ago, and she said, I love your stuff, I love your style, I love your bags. Would you ever consider writing for a magazine? And I had done one project years ago. It wasn't a bad experience. It was just, it happened and it was over. It was very quick. And so I didn't have a lot to go on as far as like magazines. And she had asked me this, and I thought, I'll think about it. And then every time I would see her at market happens twice a year, she would come up and say, hi, do you remember me? Do you want to write a pattern? And I just kept I wasn't blowing her off, but I just kind of wasn't prepared for it yet, because I didn't know, I always had too much going on. You guys, a lot of you know, I traveled intensely up until 2020. And so I always had so much going on, I was afraid to commit to anything. And was it fall? I can't remember if it was fall or spring of last year. It must have been spring. We were in Kansas City at Quilt Market. I was there with one of my fabric lines, and Joanna came over and said again, hi, are you interested? And I said, you know what? I have postponed and dragged my feet too long. Do me a favor. When you get home, you send me an email, you tell me what you want me to do, what kind of, what you're looking for, and I will do whatever you ask me to do. She said, great. I expected one project. I never in a million years expected that she would offer me this amazing deal. And she sent me an email and she said, we like to feature one designer for an entire year, so for 4 issues. We would love it for it to be you. We had this idea on doing a travel theme of bags. These were some of the thoughts we had. You can, add your 2 cents in and change it up if you think there's a better way to go. But we would love it to be you. If it's too much, and I know you have a busy schedule, we can split it between you and another designer. And I immediately said, oh no, if this is my opportunity, I'm taking it. I said, this girl is so nice to me. She likes me a lot. She's very sweet. And it's Better Homes and Gardens. I have to. That was the first quilt magazine I ever bought. So I said, all right, I said, send me the deadlines. Let's do it. And if you are not familiar with working in a magazine, it's intense. It's crazy. It happens quicker than you know. And those deadlines cannot be messed with, because they have deadlines and they're already working usually a year out. I started writing in August of 2019 for the January issue that came out this year. And that issue had to be in by, I think it was like October. So between August and October, that was it. By the end of the year, by maybe the middle of January, all 4 bags were done. So the bag that will come out in the fall, in I want to say their September, October issue, was written in January. They work really far out. So if you're ever interested in doing something for a magazine, it's a super cool way to get your name out there. It feels really awesome to say it. It really, I'm in a magazine. It just makes you really happy. I got to be on the cover twice now, which is super awesome. I'm hoping for the next one. And I got to do a series really not even without trying, because I met somebody and I networked. So it's not always going to happen that easy. And trust me, I have failed at a lot of things, and I have had a lot of opportunities that did not pan out. A lot of things that just didn't work, a lot of things that didn't get answered, emails that were ignored. So don't think that everything on my side has been sunshine and rainbows, because believe me, there's been some gray clouds. But this was just one of those super cool opportunities that was just kind of put in front of me. So thank you for asking that. I kind of forget about that. But that's something else too. You don't always have to write patterns to sell them, as in what I do with going to shows and selling them on a website and setting up an Etsy shop. You can write patterns for magazines. You could put in an idea for a book if you had one. You can submit ideas to fabric companies, and I've done some free. And when I say free, I do get reimbursed for it. I get a payment for it, but for you, it's free. You can download free patterns. So it goes into their free But obviously you do get compensated for it. But you can hook up with some of the fabric companies, and the awesome thing about that is you get fabric before anybody else does, and you kind of get to keep this big secret of like what this artist is working on next, and you get to make something. So that's also a really cool thing that's just super fun in our industry. But again, there's always a crazy deadline, and it's always super quick, and you have to be willing to work with people. Barb and I have a friend who runs a division of Northcott Fabrics, the boutique part of it. And so she'll ask Barb sometimes to make a sample for her. Even making a sample, it's like, go, 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 hurry up and get it done. Sometimes 2 days, sometimes a week if you're lucky. When it comes to Quilt Market, sometimes it's even less time because fabric gets printed super late. It's something that our industry cannot seem to work out. And it's always super quick. So in this world, on this side of it, there's always going to be super crazy deadlines, which is actually why I like doing it myself, because my deadlines are put on by me. Or sometimes by you because I want to show you something next Friday. But that's kind of how it happened and how I got into patterns and some of the ins and outs of that. I'm trying to think if there's anything I haven't told you. Oh, is there anything I didn't say? I said a lot. Are there any more questions or any comments?
There's lots of comments.
There's lots of comments.
Awesome. You're a very likable person.
Thank you.
Deserve it.
Can I say something to all of you right now?
Busy lady.
Can I just ask you one little favor? And I don't mean to be snarky or anything, but can you please stop leaving those angry faces on my videos? I said I wasn't going to say anything, but it kind of hurts my feelings. And if you don't like my video, that's fine. Just don't watch it. Please stop leaving the mad face. Whoever keeps doing that, it makes me a little upset. But it's okay. I'll get over it. But again, I know I told you guys to, you're going to get criticized, and apparently my videos do. I don't know what's angry here. We're looking at fun, pretty stuff, but maybe it was my husband last week. I don't know. So it probably was. Yeah, he's not allowed in this week. I told him not to. Let me think for a second here if there's anything else that I wanted to tell you. I didn't write stuff down for this week like I did last week because pattern writing is so fresh in my mind because it's what I do that I didn't have to think back as much as I did about making bags.
So people have gotten the train case pattern. Right?
Yay, awesome. There's another pattern coming in the magazine soon. One other thing I will just say really quickly, and again, this is a personal preference, so you decide for yourself how you want to do this. Actually, let me just say two quick things. Number one, I told you about how I kind of got, how I networked with my local quilt shops. If you are that kind of person, and I was not, that wants to walk into a quilt shop and say, hi, can I speak to the owner and introduce yourself? By all means, do it. Bring patterns with you and be willing to leave those patterns behind so that they can look at them and see if they like it, and also be under the impression that they may not call you back. Not everybody is going to love you. I mean, I love you guys. You love me. It's all good. But not everyone's going to be like, oh, yay. There were a lot of shops that didn't want to sell my patterns because they didn't like bags and they didn't want to get into all the stuff. So when things open and we're allowed to venture out again a little bit more, don't be afraid to walk into a quilt shop, especially if you know them or even if you don't know them, and just say, hey, I'm Jessica and I design patterns. Can I leave a few with you? And just kind of leave your information and chit chat and see if that's something they're interested in. And along those lines of quilt shops, not only, with teaching and patterns and stuff, if they're going to sell your patterns and they're going to have you teach, they need a sample. Some of the shops will ask you to borrow one of yours. Some of them will ask you to make one out of their fabric. Some of them don't mention it, and you kind of have to say, if you're going to have a class, maybe I should, get a sample made. Every shop is different and everybody's pattern business runs differently, and you have to decide if you're going to ask them for something free in exchange, if you want to charge them for it, if you want to loan them your sample. But if you loan them your sample, listen to me carefully, write it down, because I cannot tell you how many samples I personally have lost because I forgot who I loaned them to. And I've shipped them across the country and I don't remember where they are. So if you have one of my samples and it's not yours, send it back. But if there's any quilt shops watching, but keep track of your stuff. If you're going to loan this out, make sure you write down who has it, when you gave it to them, and make sure that you get it back. Just one of those things that I'm not always good at, and I want you to be better than I am at it. We have a question?
We do.
Yay.
How do you decide what kind of pattern to make? What inspires you?
Oh boy. Oh, you guys want me to talk for 7 hours? No, I'm just kidding. What inspires me and how do I decide what kind of pattern to make? Actually, that I'm glad you asked. That's a great question. In the beginning, when I started with the patterns, I was writing and making the things that I was selling. Now, when I'm selling things, I was getting feedback from those customers that like, I have a tote bag, but I need a purse. Do you have a wallet? So I had accumulated a bunch of things from selling them. In writing patterns, now that I'm not selling bags and I don't have that kind of feedback, I do get a lot of feedback from people at shows. I get a lot of feedback from people at shops. Now, I'm not saying to listen to everybody, and I'm not saying I listen to everybody. There have been many suggestions that I'm going to tell you are just not going to happen. If I'm not comfortable, if it's not my style, and if I don't see myself being proud of it or wanting to carry it, or even my mom wanting to carry it since she carries a lot of my stuff, I'm probably not going to write it. As of right now, I don't see a lot of inspiration for me personally for a men's line. And I get asked every so often, but my husband's not going to carry it and I'm not inspired by it. If that changes someday, then I might be. But what I do a lot is I look at, I'm on social media all the time. I flip through Pinterest and Instagram. I look at fun things that people make. I look at what designers are selling, not pattern designers, but the Louis Vuittons and even Macy's and different things, because you'll get ads for stuff and you'll see things. And I'm like, oh, that's a cool idea for a bag. I don't have a backpack. Let me do a backpack. I don't have a lot of crossbodies. I was going to shows probably 2 years ago getting a lot of, do you have crossbody bags? I don't like a two-handle bag. When you get asked something enough, you do start to get that idea in your mind and you start to think about it. So I've done a lot of crossbody bags. My inspiration is everywhere and my inspiration is you guys. The backpack that's behind me, the Laney backpack, which is a kit, there's 2 kits on the website. That was actually based off of a Target bag that I bought. I'm embarrassed to tell you that. But I was going away with my husband. We were going to a fair. I wanted to have a backpack because I didn't want to carry a purse while I was walking around the state fair. And I bought a backpack at Target and I fell in love with it. And I was like, I'm kind of embarrassed that it's not mine. And then people would say, is that your bag? And I was like, no, I didn't make it. But I fell in love with the idea of it and the shape. And so I made a bag kind of loosely based off of that. It didn't look exactly that way, but it was kind of where I got the idea from. So I'm inspired by everything. And I do listen to what people ask for. The Alice crossbody, the reason that there's a standard size and like a little size, because so many of you came up to me at shows and said, do you have something small, like really, really small that I can just fit essentials in a cell phone for a show? And I made it and now we can't leave our houses again. So I'm sorry, but it's my fault that we're trapped here. You have another question?
No, but everybody wants a So Many Creations group, so you've got to get on that.
All right, you guys, you spoke. I'm listening. I will make a So Many Creations group. I have no idea how to do that, but if I can figure out YouTube and Facebook Live, I can do that. I will work on that today or this weekend. I promise you. I promise. No, I'm not supposed to cross my fingers. I promise I'm going to do that. And one quick other little anecdote, and then I'm going to let you guys go because I feel like we've been here for 17 hours. My bag patterns in the beginning, so like the Taurus tote bag, the Diva wallet, they all had cutesy little names of like describing a person, like she's a Taurus, she travels, or she's a diva. That's where the names came from. Well, then I ran out of stuff without being really saucy and saying mean things and calling them bad names. And I thought, how do I name some of these bags? I need names. And I always said I wouldn't use names because most bag designers use names. And so I was having a conversation with my mom and I said, I have some bags. How do I name them? Like with people names. And all of my bags are named after somebody that I know, or one of my friend's children. I don't have any children, but a lot of these are named after them. I have a sister. That's the Emily bag. The bag behind me is Lainey. It's a friend's daughter. Lucy was a, oh, don't even start. Barb wants a Barb bag. And like Lucy and Piper and Ginger are named after deceased pets because they're cute names. So that's where the names come from, if you were ever wondering. I just kind of, I have qualifications for it. So I like to know what people's daughters' names are and some of my pets that are no longer with us. And that's why they're named what they're named. And I was telling this story to somebody at a show and she must not have caught the entire thing because she heard my friend's children, or well, I said my friend's children. She heard my children and she looked at me and went, how many kids do you have? Zero. I have zero. I have dogs. So they are not named after my children. I do not have 25 children. Just wanted to let you know that. Are there any more questions?
Nope,
All
that's it
right.
for now.
If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments. I know what my homework is. I have an Abby kit I have to put together for somebody, and I also have to get a Facebook group started, which is super exciting. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I will figure it out for you guys. So have an awesome weekend. Thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to like or give it a heart, and we'll see you next Friday. All right. Bye.